I stood on the edge of the dock, staring out into the dark waters of San Pedro Bay. The October wind was bone-chilling, but after 15 years of working at the port, I was used to the vagaries of nature. The massive container ship Atlantic Glory was slowly approaching the shore, its silhouette barely distinguishable in the pre-dawn twilight. Another 12-hour shift had begun. "Garrett, berth 3 is clear," my partner Ray shouted, waving from the crane cab. I nodded and headed toward the control room, checking my paperwork as I went. Working at the port was not forgiving of mistakes. Every container had to be accurately accounted for and properly placed. I was proud of my reputation as a reliable worker, even if it wasn't the career Veronica had dreamed of for me. Veronica. Thoughts of my wife brought up a familiar bitterness. When we met 15 years ago, she was an aspiring journalist reporting on the harbor. I remember her shining eyes when I showed her how to operate the forklift. Now a local TV star, she looks at me more and more often with a mixture of disappointment and pity. "Hey, Willow, you seem a little distracted today," Jim, the shift supervisor, called out to me. "Everything okay at home?" "Yeah, just didn't get much sleep," I lied, grabbing the forklift levers. The metal was cold, but it felt reassuring. Here, among the containers and cranes, everything was plain and simple. Not like at home. By noon, my back was aching mercilessly, but the work was on schedule. I took a break, sitting down on an iron bench outside the warehouse. I took coffee out of a tattered thermos. Veronica had long ago stopped making me lunch, as she used to do. Now she was working late more and more often, and on weekends she had social events with useful people. My phone vibrated. A message from Olivia, our daughter. "Daddy, are you coming to my concert at school?" I smiled. Music had been Olivia's passion since she was 5 years old. Quickly typing back, "Of course, Sunshine, I never miss your recitals." Ethan, her twin brother, was more into soccer. Sometimes I wondered why our kids were so different, even though they were born 7 minutes apart. The day dragged on slowly. Toward evening, it started to rain, turning the concrete pier surface into a slippery surface. The boys and I worked carefully but without delay. A schedule is a schedule. At such times, I especially appreciated my team. Everyone knew their job. No one complained about the conditions. In the locker room, I changed into clean clothes, which I kept in my locker. Veronica couldn't stand the smell of port that had embedded itself in my work uniform. "You're not going to sit at your desk in that, are you?" Her voice echoed in her head with a familiar intonation of superiority. As I pulled up to the house, I noticed an unfamiliar car in the driveway, the Everett family's silver Lexus. So we had company today. Meredith and Brandon were longtime family friends, but lately their visits had made me vaguely uneasy. Something had changed in their attitude toward me, a kind of condescension, as if they knew something I didn't. As I entered the house, I heard muffled voices from the living room. The laughter cut off abruptly when I appeared in the doorway. Veronica was sitting in her favorite chair, elegant as ever in a dark blue dress from a famous designer. Meredith and Brandon were sprawled on the couch, an open bottle of expensive wine between them. "Ah, Garrett," Veronica smiled. "We were just discussing the fundraiser next Friday. You haven't forgotten, have you?" I had forgotten. Of course I forgot. I had the night shift on Friday and I couldn't change it. We were waiting for an important shipment from Singapore. "I'm sorry, honey, but I have to work." I tried to speak calmly, though inside everything clenched with the anticipation of another conflict. Meredith and Brandon exchanged quick glances. Veronica set her glass down on the table with such force that the wine nearly spilled out. "Of course," her voice turned icy. "Your work is always more important than my career, more important than our social obligations. You know, Garrett, sometimes I think—" She didn't finish the sentence, but it didn't take a genius to understand her thoughts. I'd seen it in her gaze every day for the past few months. Disappointment, regret, maybe even disgust. "Are the kids asleep yet?" I asked, changing the subject. "Ethan's in his room, playing on the computer. Olivia is with her piano tutor," Veronica replied. "By the way, I made an appointment for them to see Dr. Foster next week. He's an excellent child psychologist." "A psychologist? Why do they need a psychologist?" I frowned. There's nothing wrong with the kids. Really? Veronica raised a flawlessly contoured eyebrow. And have you noticed how withdrawn Ethan has become? How Olivia cries at night? Maybe if you were home more often. Veronica's right, Garrett, Meredith interjected gently. Children at that age are very sensitive to tension in the family. I looked at her, trying to figure out what was behind those words. Meredith averted her gaze, beginning to take a sudden interest in the pattern on her cup. I'm going to go check on the kids, I said, heading for the stairs. Behind me, I heard the muffled conversation again, but now there was a distinct note of concern. As I climbed the stairs, I heard music coming from Olivia's room. She was practicing a new piece. The melody sounded sad and a little unsettling. It was dark on the second floor, with only a streak of light coming from under the door to Ethan's room. I knocked. Come in. My son's voice sounded tired. Ethan was sitting at his computer, but the screen was off. He was looking out the window where the rain was drawing whimsical patterns on the glass. What's up, champ? I asked, taking a seat on the edge of his bed. Fine. Ethan shrugged, not turning around. Dad, is it true you're sick? The question caught me off guard. What, who told you that? I heard Mom telling Grandma on the phone that you needed help. Ethan finally turned to me, his eyes full of concern. She said you were getting weird and aggressive. I felt a chill run down my spine. What else was Veronica saying about me behind my back? And more importantly, to whom? Son, I'm perfectly healthy. I tried to smile. It's just that Mom and I are going through a rough patch right now. It happens to all adults. Ethan nodded, but I could see he wasn't convinced. Footsteps were heard in the hallway. The music in Olivia's room had died down. It's time for you to go to bed, I said, getting up. School tomorrow. Walking out of my son's room, I ran into Veronica. She stood in the semi-darkness of the hallway with her arms crossed over her chest. What were you two talking about? She asked quietly, but I could hear the tension in her voice. About you telling your mother about me, I replied, trying to speak calmly. Veronica, what's going on? She looked at me for a long moment, then shook her head. You really don't understand, Garrett, or don't want to understand. The front door slammed downstairs. The Everetts were gone. The house fell into silence, broken only by the sound of rain outside the window. It sounded ominous to me for some reason. Sunday morning was overcast. I woke up early, a habit developed over years of working at the port. Veronica slept with her back turned to me. Even in her sleep, she kept her distance, as if afraid of accidental touch. I went quietly down to the kitchen, trying not to wake the kids. While making coffee, I looked at the pictures on the wall. Veronica and I on our wedding day. She was glowing with happiness, snuggling against my shoulder. The birth of the twins, the first day of school, family celebrations. When did things start to change? I couldn't pinpoint the exact moment, but I could feel something subtly slipping from my grasp. The ringing of the phone interrupted my musings. Cassidy Ramirez was Veronica's best friend. Hi, Garrett. Her voice sounded unusually official. Is Veronica home? Still sleeping. Anything urgent? A pause. No, nothing. Just wanted to make sure she was okay. After last night? After what? I asked, feeling my muscles tense up. Oh, I probably shouldn't. Just tell her I called, okay? Cassidy hung up, leaving me confused. After what did she want to make sure? What had happened yesterday that I didn't know about? Who were you talking to? Veronica appeared in the kitchen, already perfectly combed and wearing makeup despite the early hour. Cassidy called, asked if you were okay after last night. Something flashed in Veronica's eyes. Fear? Annoyance? But it disappeared immediately. Oh, that... She waved her hand, pouring herself a cup of coffee. Just a little misunderstanding at work. Nothing serious. I sensed the lie in her words, but I didn't press. Lately, any conversation could turn into a conflict, and I didn't want to ruin a Sunday morning. A stomping sound came from upstairs. The kids were awake. Olivia came down first, still in the unicorn pajamas we'd bought for her last birthday. Good morning, Daddy! She hugged me, and for a moment the world felt right again. Can I play at Sophia's today? Sophia who? I didn't remember one among her friends. Sophia is Dr. Foster's daughter, Veronica interjected. I've arranged a visit so the kids can meet her. There's that Dr. Foster again. Something about it all felt wrong, but I couldn't quite put my finger on what it was. Ethan came down last, staring at his phone. He barely nodded in response to my greeting. Honey, don't forget my parents are coming over for lunch today, Veronica said, buttering her toast with such care as if it was the most important thing in the world. I suppressed a sigh. Margaret and Walter Coltrane had always been indulgent to me, but lately their visits had become especially burdensome. The day dragged on slowly. I fiddled in the garage, trying to distract myself by working on my old motorcycle, a hobby that Veronica thought was a waste of time. Around 3 o'clock, my father-in-law's car, a late-model black Mercedes, pulled up. Garrett! Margaret hugged me with exaggerated concern. How are you feeling? Fine, I replied, surprised by her tone. She spoke to me as if I were gravely ill. Are you sure? Veronica has told us about your episodes. Episodes? Well, you know. She looked meaningfully at Walter, who nodded glumly. I intercepted Veronica's gaze. She was standing in the doorway, arms crossed over her chest. There was a strange expression on her face, a mixture of anxiety and satisfaction. At lunch, the conversation didn't flow. Margaret cast worried glances at me every now and then. Walter defiantly addressed only his daughter and grandchildren. Veronica was making small talk, talking about a new charity project on television. By the way, she said suddenly, Drew Harrington has offered me to host a new show. Prime time, big budget. Drew Harrington, our old friend, a successful attorney who always looked at Veronica with a special look. I felt something inside clench. And when were you going to tell me about this? I asked, trying to speak calmly. I'm just about to tell you. She smiled the same smile she saved for the TV cameras. Isn't this a great opportunity? Drew is a great man, Margaret put in. He cares so much about Veronica. And the kids, too. I noticed Ethan tense up at those words. Olivia continued picking at her salad with her fork, but I could see she was listening intently. After lunch, when Veronica's parents left, I went up to our office to check the mail. There was an open folder on the desk, papers from Dr. Foster. I didn't want to read it, but my eyes caught the lines. Signs of increasing paranoia, outbreaks of unmotivated aggression. Further observation recommended. What are you doing? Veronica's voice sounded harsh. She stood in the doorway, clutching her cell phone in her hands. What's this? I lifted the folder. Where did these notes come from? You went through my stuff? She ignored the question. See, this is what I'm talking about. Your suspicion, your control. Control? Veronica, it says here that I'm paranoid. Where did that diagnosis come from? Shh, she lowered her voice. The kids might hear. You need help, Garrett. We can all see it. Your mood swings, your aggression. What aggression? What are you talking about? Veronica shook her head with an expression of tired patience, as if explaining something to an uncomprehending child. For example, right now, you're raising your voice, you're getting angry over routine medical paperwork. That's not normal, honey. I stared at her, trying to recognize the woman I'd married 15 years ago. Where had that cheerful, sincere girl gone? Who was this cold, calculating stranger? The doorbell rang. I heard the voice of Peyton, Veronica's younger sister. She rarely showed up at our house. The sisters didn't really get along. Oh, you're having a family gathering here? Peyton stopped in the study doorway. Her gaze slid to the folder in my hands, then to Veronica's face. Nothing much. Veronica quickly took the papers from me. Just discussing plans for the week. Peyton raised an eyebrow. She always had a knack for sensing falsity. Are the kids home? I brought them presents from Seattle. In their rooms, Veronica replied. Just don't stay too long. They have school tomorrow. When Peyton went upstairs, Veronica turned to me. We'll talk about this later. Right now I'm too tired. It was starting to get dark outside the window. Somewhere in the house, music was playing. Olivia had sat down at the piano again. The sad melody filled the voids between walls, between people, between past and present. I could feel something important slipping through my fingers. but I couldn't figure out what it was or how to stop it. At work, I was always able to take my mind off domestic problems, but not this Tuesday. The heavy containers, the screams of the seagulls, the roar of the engines all blended into some distant background while scraps of yesterday's conversations swirled in my head. "Garrett, you missed the signal!" shouted Ray from the crane cab. I flinched and looked up. A huge container hovered just above where I was standing. A second's delay could have cost a life. "Sorry, I was thinking." I stepped back into the safe zone, feeling the concerned looks of my coworkers on my face. On my lunch break, Jim came over to me. "Listen, buddy," he began, unwrapping his sandwich. "I don't mind my own business, but you haven't been yourself today, and it's not the first time lately." "It's okay." I tried to smile. "Just didn't get much sleep." "Yeah? Was the call from HR because of lack of sleep, too?" Jim looked at me carefully. "They were inquiring about your mental state. Said there was an anonymous report of erratic behavior." I felt my back grow cold. "What kind of signal?" "Don't know the details, but be careful, Garrett. 15 years of perfect work could go to hell over one complaint." I drove home in a fog, anonymous tip, Dr. Foster's files, talking behind my back. It all added up to a frightening picture, but I still didn't want to believe the obvious. Drew Harrington's car was parked outside the house. Music was playing inside, laughter could be heard. I opened the door and froze. In the living room, Veronica was having a lively discussion with Drew, Cassidy, and the Everett couple. There was wine on the coffee table and some papers spread out on the couch. "Ah, Garrett," Veronica didn't even stand up. "We weren't expecting you so early." "I work on a schedule, you know that." I tried to speak calmly. "What's going on here?" "Just discussing a new project." Drew stood up, extending his hand. "How are you, old buddy?" I ignored the handshake. "Where are the kids?" "At my parents'," Veronica replied. "Dad picked them up after school. I thought you were informed." Who was supposed to be informed? Meredith Everett laughed nervously. "Oh, this perpetual communication problem." "Garrett," Veronica stood up, her voice soft, almost caring. "Maybe you should go upstairs and rest. You look tense." "I look tense?" I felt a wave of anger rising inside. Maybe because my life is being shattered piece by piece and I don't even understand who's doing it or why. "That's what I was talking about," Veronica said quietly, turning to the others. "These outbursts of aggression—" "What outbursts? I just want to know what's going on in my own house." "Garrett, calm down." Drew stepped forward. "No one wants to hurt you. We're all worried." "Worried? Worried about what? About me finding out the truth?" A heavy silence hung in the room. Brandon Everett defiantly stepped between Veronica and me as if defending her. "I think we'd better leave," Cassidy said, gathering her purse. "Veronica, call me later." They left one by one, casting wary glances at me. Drew was the last to leave, lingering in the doorway. "Veronica, if you need anything." When we were alone, Veronica began collecting the glasses. Her hands were trembling slightly. "Are you satisfied now?" she asked without looking at me. "Made a scene in front of my friends." "Friends? They're not friends, Veronica. They're witnesses. You're collecting witnesses to my erratic behavior, right?" She finally turned to me. Tears glistened in her eyes, but I could no longer tell if they were real or just another mask. "You're the one who's ruining everything, Garrett. Your suspicion, your accusations. I just want to help." "Help? You're the one who called the harbor? Are you trying to take away my job?" "I'm trying to protect you, to protect the kids. Can't you see what you're becoming?" The doorbell interrupted our conversation. Peyton stood on the doorstep, drenched in the sudden rain. "I brought the kids," she said. "They didn't want to stay at their parents' house." Olivia and Ethan slipped past us without saying a word. I heard 2 doors slam upstairs. "What's going on here?" Peyton shifted her gaze from me to her sister. I ran into Drew and the others. They looked worried. "Not now, Peyton." Veronica waved her hand tiredly. "It's none of your business." "Really? I think it's very much mine, especially after what I found out today." Veronica tensed. "What do you mean?" "About your conversations with Dr. Foster. about the notes you gave him, about the plans to deprive Garrett of— Shut up! Veronica almost shouted. You don't understand anything! I understand everything perfectly well, sister. Peyton stepped forward. And you know what? I'm disgusted. Veronica turned pale. Go away, now. Of course I'm leaving. But this isn't over, Veronica. I won't let you ruin another family. When the door closed behind Peyton, dead silence hung in the house. Only the ticking of the clock measured seconds, minutes, eternity. Another family? I finally asked. What did she mean? Veronica stood at the window looking out at the rain. My sister always liked to dramatize things. Stop lying! I pounded my fist on the table. The glasses shook, and one fell, shattering on the floor. See? Veronica didn't even flinch. You're not in control of yourself. I have to protect the children. At any cost. I looked at the shards on the floor, at the red drops of wine that looked like blood. Something had finally shattered in that moment. Maybe the last illusions about our marriage. Upstairs, the piano was playing. Olivia had sat down at the instrument again. But now the melody sounded different. Not sad, but anxious, almost ominous, like a warning of something terrible that had yet to happen. Wednesday began with a message from my superiors. I was suspended from work on the dock. Temporary measure while an internal investigation is conducted, Jim explained over the phone. You could hear the genuine sympathy in his voice. Hang in there, buddy. We all know you're a good worker. I sat in the kitchen, staring into a cooling cup of coffee. 15 years of perfect service, and just like that, suspended. Peyton's words about another family kept running through my mind. What did she mean by that? And why had Veronica reacted so violently? The kids had already left for school. I hadn't even had a chance to say goodbye to them. Veronica had left earlier than usual, citing an important shoot. The house seemed unusually empty and quiet. I went up to our bedroom, examining the familiar things with a new eye. What else had I missed? What other signs of betrayal lurked behind the ordinariness? The phone rang the number for Meredith Everett. I hesitated before answering it. Garrett? Are you okay? Her voice sounded unnaturally cheerful. Brandon and I are so worried. Really? And I thought you knew exactly what was going on. A pause. Look, we just want to help. Veronica told us about your problems. There are good specialists. What kind of problems, Meredith? Specifically, what are they? Well, your angry outbursts, the paranoia, the accusations against your wife. It's not normal, Garrett. Veronica showed me the tapes. What tapes? Oh, I shouldn't have. I'm sorry. I gotta go. I tossed the phone on the bed. The tapes. So she's recording me? But when? How? I started looking around the bedroom more carefully. Behind the painting, on the bookshelf, under the bedside table. No hidden cameras or recorders. The doorbell rang, taking me by surprise. Peyton stood on the doorstep, sloppily dressed as always, folder in hand. Can I come in? We need to talk. I led her into the house. She looked around as if checking to see if we were alone. Look, what I'm about to say may seem crazy, she began, taking a seat at the kitchen table. But I have to tell you, this isn't the first time Veronica has— The doorbell rang again. This time it was Drew Harrington, in his perfect suit, and with a concerned look on his face. Oh, Peyton. He frowned slightly. Didn't expect to see you here. Likewise, she replied dryly, stashing the folder in her bag. Garrett, can I talk to you for a minute? Drew nodded toward the living room. Alone? I looked at Peyton. She shook her head faintly. Talk here, I said. What's so urgent? Drew adjusted his tie, a nervous gesture I'd noticed on him before. As a friend of the family and as an attorney, I want to offer you some help. The situation is getting complicated. Veronica is worried about the safety of the children. About safety? I've never laid a finger on my children. Of course. He held up his hands in a conciliatory gesture. But your behavior lately? These outbursts of aggression? What outbursts? What are you talking about? For example, the incident yesterday. You were yelling. You broke a glass. After you held a secret meeting in my house. See? Drew turned to Peyton. This is what I'm talking about. Paranoia, aggression. The only paranoia here is your obsession with my sister, Peyton replied sharply. How many years have you been trying to take Garrett's place? Drew's face turned purple. Don't talk about something you don't understand. Oh, I understand everything perfectly well. And I've got the paperwork too. Do you want to see it? What papers? I asked. But at that moment, the front door opened. The kids from school had returned. Olivia froze on the threshold, seeing the tense scene. Ethan stood next to his sister, instinctively protecting her. What's going on? He asked, shifting his gaze from me to Drew and Peyton. Nothing, honey. Peyton was the first to come to her senses. Just grown-up talk. How's school? It's fine. Ethan shrugged. Just... What? We had a counselor come in. Asked about Dad, about whether he hurts us. I felt the ground slipping from under my feet. What? It's standard procedure, Drew said quickly. In cases like this. In what cases like this? I took a step toward him. What did you say to them? Dad, don't. Olivia's quiet voice stopped me. She looked startled, as if she was seeing me for the first time. Kids, go upstairs to your room, Peyton said softly. We're going to finish talking here. When they left, Drew turned to me again. See? They're afraid of you. It's not him they're afraid of, Peyton interjected. They're afraid of what's happening to their family, what you're all doing to their father. I'm here to help. Drew pulled out a business card. Think about the kids, Garrett. Voluntary treatment looks better than forced treatment. As he walked away, Peyton put a hand on my shoulder. Don't let them break you. I have proof. I just need a little time. At that moment, Veronica returned. She stopped in the doorway, assessing the situation. What are you doing here? She asked her sister. Visiting a friend. That's not a crime yet, is it? They looked at each other, and for the first time I noticed how different they were, not just externally, but internally. Veronica is flawless, cold, calculating. Peyton, careless, sincere, lively. Go away, Veronica said, and stay away from my family. Your family? Peyton grinned bitterly. The one you're methodically destroying? When Peyton left, Veronica stood at the window for a long time, staring after her. Why are you doing this? I asked. What have I done to you? She turned, and I saw something like regret in her eyes. You really don't understand? 15 years, Garrett. 15 years I haven't lived my life. And the children? They're not your life either? The kids will be with me, where they'll be better off. Better? With Drew? She didn't answer, but her silence said more than any words could. I spent Thursday in something of a daze. I called several companies in the morning, trying to find temporary work. No one wanted to take a man with problems. Rumors spread quickly in a small town, especially if someone intentionally helps them. Veronica left early, picking up the kids, supposedly to give them a ride to school, though they usually walked. I watched her get them into the car, Ethan looking back at the house with a kind of lost expression on his face. Olivia just stared straight ahead, clutching the straps of her backpack. The house seemed too big for one person. I wandered from room to room, noticing details that had escaped my attention before. Here's a picture from the kids' last birthday party. Veronica standing slightly away from me, a barely perceptible strain in her smile. Here's an old card from Peyton. To the best son-in-law in the world, written in her sprawling handwriting. The children's drawings on the refrigerator, all depicting me big and strong, protecting my family. It's ironic. The phone rang around noon. The number for Margaret, my mother-in-law. Garrett. Her voice sounded unaccustomedly soft. How are you? Fine, I replied dryly, especially after I got suspended thanks to someone's anonymous call. Honey, we're all worried about you. It's not okay. Your suspicion, your accusations. Is it okay to ruin someone's life with false accusations? A pause. Veronica showed us the tapes. The way you talk to the kids, the way you... What tapes? Where did she get them? See? There's that aggression again. Garrett, get help before it's too late, for the sake of the kids. I hung up the phone. My temples were pounding. The tapes. Everyone talks about some kind of tapes, but I've never seen them. What's on them? What is Veronica showing people? The doorbell rang, making me wince. Cassidy Ramirez, Veronica's best friend, stood on the doorstep. Can I come in? She looked around nervously, like she was afraid someone would see her. I led her into the house. She walked into the kitchen and sat at the table, rubbing the strap of her expensive purse. There's something I have to tell you, she began. I'm not sure if it's right, but what is it? These notes, they're not real. I mean, they're real conversations, but taken out of context, edited. What are you talking about? Veronica asked me to help. I have a sound engineer I know. We took different fragments, spliced them together so that it seemed. At that moment, the front door opened. Veronica stood on the threshold. Her eyes narrowed at the sight of Cassidy. What are you doing here? Cassidy jumped up, dropping her purse. I just... Leave! Veronica's voice was icy. Now! As Cassidy ran out of the house, Veronica turned to me. What did she tell you? The truth, about your fake records. Fake? You have proof? She smiled, that TV anchorwoman smile. Who would believe your accusations? A man with documented mental health issues? Why, Veronica, why couldn't you just get a divorce? Divorce? She laughed. And what would I have gotten? Half the house? Joint custody? No, honey. I want freedom. Total freedom. From me or for Drew? Her face changed. Don't you dare involve him. Drew is the only one who understands me, who sees my potential. And the children? Do you see their potential? Or are they just pawns in your game? I'm doing this for them too. What kind of future awaits them here? With a loader father in this backwater? With a father who loves them? Love? She puckered her lips. Love doesn't pay the bills, Garrett. Love doesn't open doors to a better life. At that moment, we heard footsteps. Ethan was standing on the stairs. How long had he been there? What had he heard? Honey. Veronica instantly changed her tone. Why aren't you at school? We had our last class canceled. He looked at us with a strange look. I came to get my soccer ball. We have practice. I'll drive you. Veronica stepped toward him. No need. He backed away. I'll walk myself. As he walked away, Veronica turned to me. See what you're doing? Turning the kids against me? Me? You're the one ruining their lives with your lies. Careful, honey. She pulled out her phone. Your anger only proves my point, and I'm recording every word. At that moment, there was a knock on the door. Peyton stood on the threshold, some man behind her with a folder of papers. I'd like you to meet my sister, Peyton said. This is Michael Thornton, a private investigator. He has some very interesting material on your methods. Veronica turned pale. You wouldn't dare. Why not? It's not like you're leaving me any choice. Choice? You're just jealous. I've always been jealous. Jealous? Peyton grinned bitterly. Of what? Your ability to ruin other people's lives. Go away. Veronica grabbed her phone. Or I'll call the police. Call them, the detective replied calmly. I think they'll be interested to hear about some of the inconsistencies in your statements. The front door opened again. Olivia had returned. She froze, looking at the tense faces of the adults. What's going on? Her voice shook. Nothing, sweetie. Veronica tried to smile. The adults are just talking. No, Olivia said suddenly firmly. You're not talking. You're destroying our family. I'd never seen my daughter so determined. She stood, straightened, clutching the straps of her backpack, just like she had that morning, but now there was not emptiness in her eyes, but pain and anger. We heard, she continued, me and Ethan, heard you talking to Aunt Cassidy about the records, how you asked her to help make Daddy look bad. Veronica staggered back, grabbing the wall. Olivia, honey, you don't understand. I understand everything, Mom, and I won't be quiet anymore. She turned and ran upstairs. A moment later, we heard music, but not sad music as usual, but fierce, stormy music, as if expressing all that had boiled up in my little girl's soul. That's it, Veronica, Peyton said quietly. Game over. Veronica stared into the space in front of her, and for the first time I saw something resembling fear in her eyes. Fear of exposure? Fear of losing control? Or maybe fear of realizing what she'd done? I spent the night without sleep. Veronica didn't come home, sending a quick text to say she was staying with her parents. The kids were asleep in their rooms. I checked on them several times, as if I was afraid they'd disappeared too. Olivia was clutching her old plush dog tightly in her sleep, the toy I'd given her for her 5th birthday. Ethan scattered his textbooks across the bed, falling asleep over his homework. Around 3 in the morning, I went down to the kitchen. In the darkness, the house seemed foreign, hostile. How many lies had soaked into those walls? How much pretense lurked behind family dinners, holidays, ordinary evenings? The phone vibrated. A message from Jim. Hang in there, buddy. The guys at work say hi. We all know it's some bullshit. I stared at those words, and my throat constricted with gratitude. At least someone else believed in me. The morning brought new challenges. Margaret had come to pick up the kids at school, apparently at Veronica's request. They're staying with me. I stood in the doorway, blocking her way. Garrett, don't make this difficult. She pressed her lips together. I have a temporary power of attorney from Veronica. What kind of power of attorney? In case of unforeseen circumstances. Given your condition, my condition? I felt my hands shaking. You're all repeating it like parrots. Where's the proof? Dad? Ethan's voice made me turn around. He was standing on the stairs holding Olivia's hand. We want to stay with you. Margaret stepped toward them. Honey, your mom is worried. Mommy's lying, Olivia said firmly. We know that. And you know it, Grandma. Something flashed in Margaret's eyes. Doubt? Shame? She opened her mouth to say something, but that's when Peyton's car pulled up. About time, my sister-in-law said, getting out of the car. I'm just taking the paperwork to the lawyer's office. Do you want to see it, Mom? The part about how Veronica pulled the same stunt on the Baker family 3 years ago is especially interesting. What are you talking about? About how our dear Veronica helped her friend Laura Baker get rid of her husband. Exactly the same scheme. Fake records, false testimony, child manipulation. Only back then I didn't say anything. Not anymore. Margaret turned pale. It's not true. It is true, Grandma, Ethan said suddenly. We heard Mom talking to Aunt Laura about it. They were laughing. At that moment, another car pulled up to the house. Drew Harrington's. What the hell is going on here? He looked annoyed. Veronica called me hysterical. Ah, our noble knight. Peyton crossed his arms over his chest. Come to rescue a damsel in distress? Or to protect your own interests? What do you mean? Your little real estate scam. The one where you used Veronica's influence to get a building permit. I wonder what the ethics committee will say when they find out the details. Drew jerked as if from a blow. You're bluffing. Really? Peyton pulled out her cell phone. Want to hear a recording of your conversation with the city council members? I learned a couple tricks from my sister. I watched this scene as if from the sidelines. All the scheming, the manipulation, the lies. Had this really been real life around me all these years? Dad? Olivia tugged at my sleeve. Can I not go to school today? I want to play for you. Her words brought me back to reality. In the midst of all this chaos, my daughter just wanted to play the piano. For me. Of course, sunshine, I hugged her. And you, Ethan, you can stay home too. That's irresponsible, Margaret began, but Peyton interrupted her. No, Mom. Irresponsible is ruining a man's life for your oldest daughter's ambition. Drew stepped forward. Look, let's discuss this calmly. There's nothing to discuss. I felt the children pressed against me from both sides. Get out of my house. All of you. You can't. I can. And if you don't leave now, I'll call the police. I'm sure they'll be interested to hear about the forged documents and false accusations. Margaret looked confused. But Veronica lied to you, Mom, Peyton said softly. Just like she lied to all of us. It's time to face the truth. When they left, there was a strange silence in the house. Olivia went straight up to her piano. A moment later, The first notes poured out. Not sad, not anxious, but something cleansing. Dad, Ethan looked at me seriously. You're not leaving, are you? Like that other dad? What other dad? Sophia's dad. Mom talked to Aunt Laura. They made sure he left. Sophia's living with a new daddy now, but she doesn't like him. I knelt down, hugging my son. I'm not going anywhere, I promise. Peyton stood at the window looking out at the street. She won't stop, you know. Veronica never admits defeat. I know, but now I have proof and support. She turned to me. I should have spoken up sooner, when I saw what was happening to the Baker family. Maybe then, it's not your fault. No one expected this, not even from Veronica. The phone vibrated, a message from her. You're going to regret this. I won't let you ruin my life. I showed the message to Peyton. She shook her head. It's always about me, even now. The music was still pouring from upstairs. Olivia was playing something new, something of her own. Ethan settled on the couch with a book. For the first time in a long time, he looked calm. What now? I asked Peyton. Now we fight. For the truth, for the children, for justice. I looked at the picture on the wall, Veronica and I on our wedding day. So happy, so in love. What happened to that girl when ambition and lies replaced her love and honesty? New message from Veronica. Turn on the news, Channel 5. I turned on the TV. She was watching from the screen. Flawless makeup, perfect hair, eyes full of tears. And I'm afraid for my children. When the person you love changes before your eyes, becomes aggressive, out of control. Peyton turned off the TV. She's using her position on television. Clever. What am I supposed to do? The same thing you've always done. Love your children. The truth is stronger than lies, Garrett. It just takes time. Olivia finished playing. In the silence that followed, I heard the clock on the wall ticking, measured, quiet, a reminder that life goes on, no matter what. Friday began with a phone call. Jim, my supervisor at the harbor, spoke quickly and excitedly. Garrett, turn on Channel 5, immediately. I turned on the TV and froze. On the screen was Cassidy Ramirez, Veronica's best friend, the same one who had tried to tell me the truth about the tapes. She was sitting across from the morning show host, nervously rubbing the strap of her watch. I can't keep quiet anymore. Her voice shook. What's happening to Garrett Willow is a deliberate campaign to discredit him. I know because I helped create those fake tapes. The anchor stepped forward. Are you claiming that the recordings showing Mr. Willow's violent behavior are fake? Yes, we took snippets of different conversations, edited them. Veronica knew what she was doing. She'd been planning this for months. Silence hung in the studio. I heard the door open upstairs. The kids were awake too. Garrett! Jim's voice on the phone sounded agitated. The board of directors wants to meet with you. Today. I think they're willing to reconsider your suspension. I thanked him and hung up. Ethan stood in the living room doorway, still in the superhero pajamas I'd bought him last Christmas. Dad? What's going on? Things are getting better, son. I tried to smile. It's just the truth is finally coming out. And Mom? Is she coming back? I didn't know what to answer. How do I explain to a kid that his mother was deliberately trying to ruin his father's life? At that moment, the doorbell rang. Standing on the threshold were Brandon and Meredith Everett. They looked embarrassed and confused. May I come in? Meredith asked. We have something to say. I let them into the house. Olivia came down the stairs, still sleepy, but immediately tensed up when she saw the guests. We saw Cassidy's interview, Brandon began. We want to apologize. We should have realized something was wrong. Should have asked questions. Veronica was very persuasive, Meredith added. She showed us records, documents from doctors. Forged documents, came a voice from the door. Peyton stood there, holding a folder. I have proof. Dr. Foster never examined Garrett. All the reports are false. Meredith went pale. Oh my God. And we were helping her, spreading those rumors. You're not the only ones, Peyton said. She manipulated everyone, but it's ending now. The phone rang again, Veronica's number, I put it on speakerphone. How could you? Her voice was ringing with rage. You turned even Cassidy against me. I didn't do anything, Veronica. It's your lies that are finally coming back to you. Lies? I did it for all of us, for a better life. For yourself, Ethan said quietly. Just for yourself, Mom. There was silence. Then Veronica spoke in a different tone, soft, ingratiating. Honey, you don't understand. Adults sometimes do complicated things. No, Mommy, I do understand. You wanted to get rid of Daddy like Aunt Laura got rid of Uncle Tom. But Olivia and I don't want to be like Sophia. We don't want another Daddy. Ethan, I'm sorry, Mom, but I don't believe you anymore. He turned and walked upstairs. Olivia followed him. Veronica passed out. A heavy silence hung in the room. We'll go, Meredith said. We're ready to testify about how Veronica manipulated us. After they left, Peyton sat down next to me. Are you okay? I don't know, I answered honestly. So many years. How could I not see it? Because you loved her. Love can be blinding sometimes. The sounds of a piano came from upstairs. Olivia was playing something new, unfamiliar. It's my new song, she called out. I named it Truth. I felt the tears coming up. My children. They were stronger and wiser than I could have imagined. The TV was still on. It was now showing archival footage of Veronica interviewing different people. Her perfect smile, flawless makeup, always the right words. How many lies lurked behind that mask? Garrett. Peyton put a hand on my shoulder. You need to go to the port. Talk to your superiors. I'll stay with the kids. Thank you. I squeezed her hand. For everything. Hey, that's what family is for. A real family. Before heading out, I went up to the kids. Ethan was sitting on the bed with his arms wrapped around his knees. Dad, he looked up at me. Is everything going to be okay now? It's going to be different. I sat down next to him. But we'll get through it, together. You know, he was quiet. I used to think being strong was like in the comics, having superpowers, defeating villains. Now I realize that real strength is telling the truth, even when it's scary. I hugged him, feeling his skinny body shiver. My boy had grown up too soon, but I couldn't help but be proud of him. Olivia continued to play. Her music filled the house, displacing the silence, the fear, the lies. It was the music of hope, a little sad, but bright. On the way to the harbor, I turned on the radio. The news was everywhere. Cassidy's interview, statements from other people who were beginning to tell the truth. Veronica's story was falling apart before my eyes. The phone vibrated again. A message from Margaret. I need to talk to you. About Veronica. About what happened all those years ago. I didn't bother answering. Some conversations could wait. The main thing now was to rebuild my life, to be there for my children, to learn to believe in myself again. I was met by Jim at the harbor entrance. Welcome back, buddy. Your crane missed you. I looked at the familiar cranes, the containers, the sea in the distance. Here, everything was plain and simple. There were no lies or betrayal here, just a job I loved and could do well. There would still be many conversations, explanations, perhaps a trial ahead. But the worst is over. The truth finally came to the surface, like a lifeline after a long plunge into darkness. A week passed. October was coming to an end, and the morning fog over the harbor was growing thicker. I went back to work, though it was different now. Colleagues looked on with sympathy and respect. Superiors tried to make up for the unfair suspension with more attention. That morning I lingered at the coffee machine in the control room. The TV in the corner of the room was showing the news. Veronica had announced her departure from the local channel. The anchorwoman said something about new career opportunities in the big city, but everyone knew the real reason. Hey, Willow, Ray called out to me. There's your ride over there. I looked out the window and saw Peyton's car. She brought the kids every morning so they could say goodbye to me before school, a new ritual that had come about after all the events. Daddy! Olivia jumped out of the car, holding up some papers. Look, I've been chosen for the school concert. I'm going to play my new play. The one? Yes. The teacher said it's a very mature piece for my age. Ethan stood nearby, smiling. He too had changed over the days, calmer, more confident. "And I have practice today," he said. "Coach says I can be team captain." "Proud of you both." I hugged them. "I'll see you tonight?" "Sure, it's Friday night, our pizza and board game night." It became a tradition, too. Every Friday we got together, played games, and talked. Peyton often joined us, bringing her signature chocolate cupcakes. "Garrett," Peyton came up to me as the kids ran back to the car. "Don't forget, there's a meeting with the lawyer at 2 o'clock. I nodded. The details of the custody agreement were to be discussed. Veronica had unexpectedly agreed to all the terms. Apparently, a new job in another city was more important to her. The day dragged on slowly. I drove the crane, unloaded containers, filled out paperwork, a routine that now seemed almost sacred in its simplicity and honesty. On my lunch break, Margaret called. Since Veronica's revelation, she had lost a lot of weight. It was as if she had aged 10 years all at once. "I just wanted to say," she stammered. "Dad and we were wrong. All those years we looked down on you, thought you weren't good enough for our daughter. And it turns out—" "Margaret," I interrupted gently, "let's just start over, for the sake of the children." The lawyer's office was cool and quiet. Peyton sat next to me while the lawyer read out the terms of the agreement. Veronica showed up exactly at the appointed time, impeccably dressed with a new haircut. "I got an offer to anchor the evening news in Seattle," she said without looking at me. "I'm leaving in a week." "And the kids?" They made their own choices." Her voice shook. "Maybe that's even better, until things settle down." I looked at her and didn't recognize the woman I'd lived with for 15 years. Where was the cheerful girl who interviewed the dock workers? Who laughed at my clumsy jokes? Who cried tears of happiness as she held her newborn twins in her arms? "Sign here, please." The lawyer's voice brought me back to reality. Veronica signed her signature in a quick, confident motion, then stood up, adjusting her purse. "I'd like to say goodbye to the children, if that's okay with you." "It's their decision. Ask them." Walking out of the office, I took a deep breath of cool fall air. Something was ending. Something was beginning. "You okay?" Peyton asked. Weird, empty, but right. In the evening, the kids decided they wanted to say goodbye to their mother. We met at the park, a neutral area where we had once walked all together. "I'll call," Veronica said, hugging them, "and you'll be able to come visit me on vacations." "If we want to?" Ethan clarified. "Yes, sweetie, if you want to." Olivia kept to herself, rubbing the sleeve of her sweater. "I wrote a new song. Do you want to hear it?" "Sure." Veronica tried to smile. "But not tonight. Maybe sometime later, when things get real." I saw Veronica's face tremble. My wise little girl had found a way to say what we all felt. Forgiveness was possible, but not now. Time would have to pass first. At home, Peyton was waiting for us with pizza and board games. The kids quickly fell into their usual Friday night routine, but I noticed Ethan furtively wiping his eyes from time to time, and Olivia cradling her stuffed dog. I glanced at the pictures on the wall. We'd have to make new ones reflecting our new reality. "Thanks for sticking around." "You're welcome, son-in-law," she smiled. "By the way, Cassidy called. She's been offered a job in another city, away from all this." "What about you? What are your plans?" "Well, I'm thinking of opening an art studio here. Olivia says she wants to learn how to paint." From upstairs came the sounds of a piano, quiet, peaceful, not sad or cheerful, just real. I stepped out onto the back porch. The October evening was cool, and the air smelled of fallen leaves in the near winter. Somewhere in the distance, a harbor tugboat hummed, a familiar sound that always reminded me of home. The phone vibrated, a message from Jim. "The board of directors has approved your promotion. Starting next week, you're senior dispatcher. Well deserved." I smiled. The piano was playing in the house. Peyton was humming something, rattling dishes in the kitchen, and the lights were on in the kids' room. Olivia had finished playing. In the silence that followed, I heard Ethan reading aloud, apparently to his sister. It had become a tradition, too. They often fell asleep in the same room now, supporting each other,